We're going live here in a second. Streaming is getting set up. And I think we're good.
All
Okay.
right.
Hello, everyone. I am Jake Litke, your host. This is Cannabis Marketing Live. And today we have Matt Taverna from Statera. We are going to be talking about customer data enrichment, what you can do with your customer data, how you can get more out of it, and how you can use that to drive new sales and revenue. So, Matt, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks for
Um,
having me again.
yeah, I
Happy New
think
Year.
we need to get you like, on SNL where they give you the coat
I
and you
know, I
go
know.
like five
I have,
times.
I just put away my my Christmas red jacket. I should have kept it out.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into it right off the bat. Let's lay some groundwork here. We're going to talk about customer data, which comes in a lot of different forms. And within the cannabis industry, the most common form of customer data that people have is their POS data or their e-commerce data. Those systems are tied together. Most frequently, people are using that customer data to be able to send retention emails or loyalty offers. But in my experience we work with lots of cannabis retailers and brands. Frequently, that's a underutilized asset
Yeah.
that dispensaries have. And I think that, we've talked about this before. There's certainly a lot of issues around data siloing that occurs where people are using systems and they're not necessarily all connected. And then I think there's a general just lack of awareness of some of the tools and systems that exist outside of the cannabis industry that CPG companies use that are actually available. And I want to talk today about kind of what those are and how people can get more value out of their data, which at the end of the day, your data is the only real true piece of IP that you own that you can continue to reuse and get value from, and that no one else has access to. Well, shouldn't have access to.
Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, and your data like just really represents your the business you built because that's your customer and that's your bread and butter. So yeah, so my company is Statera. We build a 260 million person database of every American. And so we have consumer data on most every American, which means, when you have something like your CVS card, or you fill out a warranty card, or some of your behaviors that you share with retailers, that data is is sold and commoditized, and consumer data companies acquire it and kind of track your behaviors and use it to target other marketing. And what we can do is effectively match the data that's on a list like mine to customer data sets. In kind of in more established retail industries and in CPG, we have data flows where once a customer is acquired, if it's an online order, we have the ability to kind of shoot an API call to the POS system of that business and kind of complete that customer record. So if it's Matt Taverna buying a widget at widget.com, the widget.com people will have a more complete view of who Matt Taverna is. Things like, my gender, even my full name. If I just put a cell phone number or email address, we can complete names, and just really a complete view of me as a customer.
Yeah. And so let's talk about some of those other data points. So you've got a customer or a set of customers, you have their email address, um, and you have your own information as a retailer, like what they're purchasing. Now, what are some of the things that are available to be enriched about an individual that would be relevant to a marketer, in this case?
Yeah, so I think just to start off is knowing the person's first and last name. So if it's, if your POS system or your loyalty program only captures just a part of a record, if it's a cell phone number or email address, you can actually quite easily append a first and last name and residential address to that record. And that kind of gives you puts that like an actual person onto what is really normally just a piece of information for you to go make an offer. And so right out of the gate, you can tell, I think a really important thing is if where a person lives. So if they live close to your dispensary, if they're a tourist, that's an important piece of information there. And from there, excuse me, there are other demographics that you can append, gender and age, and other kind of just like simple demographics, such as, estimated household income. And then you get into other kind of more kind of advanced consumer behaviors on what people kind of like to spend their money on and spend their time doing.
Yeah. So when we are looking at someone's first party data set, like here's our list of customers. You can take the whole customer list, or you can break it into pieces. Let's say you wanted to delineate between people that purchase gummies versus people that purchase flour. We can take those two audiences. We can run them through the enrichment process, and you can get an automated lookalike audience, right? So like here's
Right.
your existing customers, and then here are other people that are in your market area that have the same general profile. That's a pretty simple way to do it.
Yeah,
And
and so what Jake, I mean, so what Jake means is you have 42-year-old male Matt Taverna who's going and buying pre-rolls every day or every week. It's just simply finding what other 42-year-old males are out there that have similar attributes. So you can kind of, if you think about your Excel spreadsheet and how this is set up, we talked about, the kind of row of data and completing that row. It's kind of interesting to think about that in an individual way, but it's not very useful. Where it's useful is in aggregate, right? So comparing and contrasting the Matt Taverna completed record with the other folks in a zip code or in a certain area around a dispensary or in a target universe that's not necessarily geographic. Like Jake said, finding people that look like your target customer, and
yeah,
then therein creating like a customer acquisition audience for your business.
yep. So you can come up with, like I said, a sort of a computer modeled score of, these are your existing customers, here's their propensity, and it's a lot of different categories, right? So it could be things that people purchase, interest in recreational activities. Um, and so we can use an automated system to say these are people that are similar, but you can also dive into the data at that point once you have it about your customers and say, okay, well, it turns out that people that purchase premium flour also tend to go to concerts or whatever that data point is. You can then use that information uh, for developing strategy, right? So, okay, now we know some more things about our customers. How does that inform the marketing messaging? And what is it that we want to tell consumers? And then you can segment those campaigns separately, right? So you could have a specific campaign tactic that is around people that go to concerts because you know that there's correlation with a customer cohort that is valuable to you, and you can give them distinct messaging from people that are purchasing gummies or whatever that is.
Right. Yeah,
Now,
and it's also, I mean, it is kind of thinking to kind of the most kind of guerrilla way of marketing cannabis is billboard advertising, putting the billboard next to the concert venue or near a concert venue, rather than just kind of the cheapest one you can find on the closest highway.
Yeah.
right? Just making informed decisions based on your actual customer base, and turning strategy into then tactics of like the big picture strategy, and then the tactic is like the placement of the ads.
Yeah, I mean, invariably, when you start to pick apart the consumer data for an audience, you end up with surprises. It's human nature to make some assumptions about your customers. We've done this analysis with, large retailers where they come in with pretty strong opinions about who they think their customer is and exactly how they behave. And when we actually take their audience data, their customer list, and run that through a demographic profile, there's always interesting things that come out. And that's just on the audience side, right? Like, oh, it turns out that you have a really large amount of dog owners in your audience group, right? So that does inform things like, oh, well, maybe we should advertise near the dog park, for example. It doesn't always have to be directly correlated to, I'm going to use this for retargeting for digital. I mean, that's what we do. But as you mentioned earlier, it helps inform your entire marketing strategy and helps you be more efficient, with your budget in any channel that you're advertising in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it leads to better customer retention in kind of being able to craft messages that are tailored to that person's actual interest, rather than just, hey, it's Thursday afternoon, you're gonna get 15% off. That's a nice offer. But actually thinking about brand affinity, and even the channel that somebody likes to be, like a really interesting consumer attribute that you can find, and you can utilize is how does the customer communicate with retail? So do they actually respond to text messages? Do they respond to display ads? Those are things that are actually measured and available to purchase and enrich your data with. So
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about how the data is handled. Obviously, we're talking about something that is a high value asset for an organization. They're going to take their customer list and they're going to work with some third party, and they need to make sure that that data is secure because it is in many cases personally identifiable information. So
right.
you can't just like be emailing it
Yeah,
out.
and like you said, it's the most important asset that a business can own is their customers. So
Yeah, so let's say I'm a dispensary. I've got, a few thousand records, 10,000 records or whatever of customers that have purchased from me. How do I go from having a bunch of names and email addresses to having an enriched data set where I can do analysis on my audience and then use that for targeting?
yeah, I mean, I think it's the first step is contracting with a trusted vendor that you vetted and that you can kind of trust with your data, which means that there should be some kind of contractual relationship up front, with a non-disclosure agreement and the way that vendor is going to be handling your data, ensuring that the data is not going to be, very very low level, and like in a low level way, the data should be secure, and not be able to be hacked or leaked. But even if the vendor is going to be making sure that they only are using your data for your project. So if you're sending 10,000 customers, that will remain your data set the entire time that your vendor is actually using it, rather than the vendor then going and putting it into some kind of cooperative or reselling your data to your competitors. So that's kind of if you think of like the hierarchy of needs of the contracts here, and then there should be some kind of agreement on what happens in data transfer. So there's industry standards on how data is transferred. So your 10,000 person list, if it you download it from your point of sale, and you upload it to software that you should be able to recognize. whether it's something like a Dropbox or Box.com, or something a little bit more sophisticated like Amazon Web Service, which is for kind of more sophisticated data files and bigger sized data files. And then a really detailed description of kind of what happens to that data while it's in the vendor's hands.
Yeah. So you've got a couple, in the life cycle here. First off, when you're choosing a vendor, you want to read the data usage words carefully, right? Because many data vendors will have clauses in those contracts that say that they are allowed to reuse your data for vague purposes. So you want to make sure that you understand exactly what that language is. Then there's, how do you get the data from one place to another? That should go through a secure channel. You should not be just like emailing a zip file of your records to someone.
Right.
And then there's the question of when the data is at rest, how is it secured? And then further, there's another clause that you want to have in there, which is if you end your relationship with them, that needs to be incumbent on the data vendor to destroy that data, because they should never own the data. It's your data you own. They're helping you use it. And if you terminate a relationship, that needs to go away, right? So
it'll be called like that data retention and data destruction clauses. So it's it's actually fairly normal in the kind of just very simple data appends for your data vendor to destroy their version of your source data immediately after they deliver your finished product. And they're even, we at Statera have just completely separate storage for customer projects. We call it like the actual production warehouse versus our actual build warehouse, where we actually build the data that we use. And so keeping things separate is super important. And there are if you're dealing with like really big data sets, if you're like a multi-state operator, or if you have assets of hundreds of thousands of customers, and you're going to do a long-term project, at the end of that relationship, you can get a certificate of destruction, which is there's an industry standard in the data industry where you can ask the vendor to send you what is essentially like an affidavit that says, yes, we deleted the data on this date and this is how we did it, and our server is now free of your data.
I always enjoy sometimes when we run across like older data agreements that haven't been updated, and it actually includes like CD-ROMs.
Oh yeah.
Like things like, oh, we will shred the CD-ROMs that the data came on. I haven't seen
it. Well, if you're dealing with state and municipal governments, they still send those. So
they do.
And well, sometimes they send them, and sometimes you have to be in person to get it. So it's like and I'm not sure if that actually survived the pandemic, like those kind of rules. But
so that's who's still buying the blank CDs at Office Depot.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. So that's good. Just sort of general governance, some advice on how to handle your data and what to look for when you're choosing a partner. Let's talk about, from a policy perspective, we've talked about transit, custody, and data transit and custody, but what are some limitations that people need to be aware of what you can and can't do? Let's say you've enriched your data, and maybe you've gone from names to email addresses or phone numbers to email addresses. You now have this collection of email addresses or phone numbers, but you still have to follow the rules about what you can do about unsolicited emails. You've got can spam, and then at the same time.
And I think there are really two kind of rules. There's the actual like laws and regulations of can spam and do not call, do not solicit, which really should be governed by the way that you draft your opt-in in the beginning of your relationship. That would usually be that, hey, if you submit your email address, that also means we can send you direct mail and text you. And there'll
Yeah.
be ways that your attorney can help you draft it that way. So just making sure you're covered there. And if you're not, then to make sure that you aren't using different medium to contact the wrong people. But then secondly, I think there are like kind of like actual business rules, so you don't turn people off. I think like a more savvy customer and people who are actually going to respond to your messages may it may leave a bad taste in their mouth if they have given you a cell phone number, and then all of a sudden they receive an email from you. It might be something that just turns them off. And so you need to just be careful about, just like the way you are practicing your marketing, because I think, particularly in the more mature markets, California obviously comes top of mind, that there's just a lot of competition out there, and it's very easy for someone to switch loyalties, particularly when you're dealing with just like a constant barrage of offers.
Yeah.
And then something I learned in politics is a lot of political email and political texts are based in fundraising. Very similar to how like a lot of cannabis texts and emails are based in offers. So come on in and buy more cannabis. That's what you want to do. Think about actually having a relationship with your customer. Don't ask them to buy something every time you text them. And that's hard because marketing dollars are scarce, and you want the customer to remain, a purchaser as well. But it's kind of maintaining a relationship is important. And there are things you can do to promote products in your business without having to always just be looking for the next sale.
Yeah, so we talked to a lot of our marketers, and I think this concept gets forgotten sometime, but marketing is about a value exchange between you and your customer, right? So at the base level, you have a product that you're selling them, they're going to buy from you, there's a value exchange there. But when you're talking about marketing communications, you're asking someone to take their time to read your information.
Right.
So the most common and straightforward thing that people do is, hey, here's 20% off. There's some value that you're offering. However, if you're just doing that every week, or I've been on some lists where I get like 3 texts a week, when you're sending email specifically, you have an opportunity for like a longer form piece of delivery. And so to the extent that you can provide value in the information that you're asking the consumer to read, that will help your relationship with that consumer. And when I say value, that could be interesting information. It could be something funny, really anything where someone's going to take the, 5, 10, 20 seconds out of their day, and they're going to come away feeling like they got something other than you just asking them to spend more money.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that like for those of you who think we're now delving into creative, we're not. It actually then circles back to knowing what your customer likes to hear and what they want to talk about, or at least being able to like have an educated way of making those kind of decisions. So, talking about cannabis in terms of music, talking about cannabis in terms of health, talking about cannabis in terms of lifestyle, just being able to discern and segment your list, and it just makes makes offers kind of more natural too. So if it's a kind of a health message, you have products that deal specifically with the kind of wellness aspects of cannabis, that's much easier ask than just like, hey, it's starting at 4 p.m. on Friday, like here you go. Although those are great sometimes, but
yeah. The other thing that you can start to gather as you start to, leverage dynamic content in your outbound marketing messages, whether it's text or email, is you'll start to see engagement rates differ based on what the content is in the messaging that you're sending out. And then you can use that feedback loop to send out better and better messaging that's more compelling. And that's where it's getting back. I'll go back into what I was talking about before in terms of you've got 10,000 customers. They're not all the same. This is another concept that people sometimes forget, which is that like cannabis consumers are all regular people that have other things that they're interested in. And so taking an approach of, just going right after, you like flower or whatever it is, that's fine. But if you enrich your data set, you can start to understand that you've got an audience over here that is parents, because that's one of the things we can look for, children within household. You can look for things like these people have dogs or cats. They go to concerts, as we mentioned. All of those things allow your marketing team to start to deliver dynamic messaging across your customers in an effort to foster a better relationship with your consumers so they feel like you're giving the messaging that they appreciate. And you can't really do that effectively without enriching the data set you have. You're not really going to like give 100-question poll to all your customers to ask them about who they are and what they like in life. But the data you have today, you do have the ability to go out, append that with a third-party data partner, and get that level of insight.
Yeah, and it takes it beyond just like a product-driven marketing strategy, where you can even let your bud tenders know that, hey, we know, and we can track very easily what products move on what days and what time of month and things like that. But you can even dig deeper, and you kind of begin to understand maybe why certain products are moving at certain times of the month or at certain days. And so they can be prepared to know what kind of crowd is coming in, not just what kind of product is going to move, but why that product is moving. And there's very simple reporting you can do that can translate to like a human interaction at the dispensary that you can get into just as easily as you could do it with the segmented message on email.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a question here. Oh, and if anyone wants to ask questions, at least on the Zoom link, I can see them. There's a question about frequency. So if you've got an email list, what are best practices around around how frequently you update that? Does that happen every month? Is it live? Like, how does that normally work?
Emailing, how often you should be updating the contact information and things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think on a quarterly basis is pretty standard. At the very least, on an annual basis, it's because it does a couple things. It lets you know some updates on some people, your customers' affinities, but it also can tell you if the customer's moved, so you can stop wasting your time trying to get people in the door. So like a quarterly or annual basis is good there.
Now, if you've got a high volume of new records coming in, is there a case where you technically could do it monthly, right?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and it's not. I mean, I think that the thing about most data companies, or at least most data companies that I've come across, is if you once you do something once, it's very easy to kind of keep that record updated. There's actually we've just instituted over the past couple of years using Snowflake, where it's not even you're not even really sending back a file. There's just a constant view of the file of 10,000 records, and that view just gets updated constantly as Statera gets new information about a record. That record just kind of updates automatically, so you can kind of look at it and see the minuscule changes as they happen. And so once you kind of do, you kind of jump into the cold water the first time, it's easier to stay in the water and kind of enjoy it. That's a good. I'm getting good at this, Jake.
Yeah, you like that? It's a good analogy. It gets
So
data river gets warmer.
Once you jump in, it's easier for you to kind of maintain the currency of the data.
The current and the river. So
Current,
we can go, we
yes.
can just keep
Oh
going.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
Uh, so aside from bad dad jokes, you mentioned movers, and this is actually, I don't know the answer to this question.
Yeah,
Maybe you do, this would be fun trivia. What is the frequency of moving? Like, did you see like how many, I don't know if you know this information, but like
I do.
what percentage of the US population, and maybe it's different by state, moves in a given
Well,
month?
I think there's two questions. I don't know that one, but I do know the frequency of people who are engaged in the type of commerce we're talking about, not just cannabis, but kind of like commerce where it's kind of like high touch e-commerce. Your list can change as much as 20% per year.
Really?
Yeah.
Like meaning
And then,
the,
well, that's that's the actual list of, yeah, like their addresses, but it's also your target audience outside of your customers, your potential customers has kind of changed over upwards of 20%.
that's interesting. So the underlying data for your existing customers changes. Like the address, like this person does
Yes,
from
yeah,
somewhere
yeah,
else.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and I can get some. Maybe we can publish a couple of little infographics on the actual numbers. But yeah, I mean it's upwards of 20%. You know, and particularly in areas where um really high volume dispensaries are located, cities and um more kind of high income states and areas like that.
Yeah. All right. Let's go. I
I
want to
mean,
cover
because I mean, look, and it might not even be that someone's moved cities, but in, say, if you're in San Francisco or you're in LA or you're in New York, the people move every year, right?
yeah.
And they might move a block down the street, but now your direct mail is literally being wasted. Now your your digital advertising is going to the wrong maybe IP address or something like that.
Yeah. So let's actually talk about direct. We didn't really talk about that much, and I think that's kind of the final topic here. And this is the bridge of um let you can absolutely have, let's say you have a newsletter sign up on your site. These aren't even necessarily customers. If you don't have a newsletter sign up on your site, you should think about doing it because some number of people will sign up for it, and many of those may not be your active customers. But let's say you've got email addresses, you've got matt@gmail.com, but you don't have anything else about them. Now, you can take that email address, you can run it through a data enrichment process, and you can get back a physical address, right? And now with a physical address, you can go, old school here, and you can and send mailers, which can be very effective. Um, is there, are people allowed to do that? I feel like direct mail, like mailing addresses, are relatively public record. What are the guidelines around that?
Yeah, I think the great thing about the U.S. mail is that it's a very like it's a traceable, trusted, and because of the history and the regulations around the way that mail is, that postage is actually done and how the way mail is conducted, that kind of practice is allowed.
Okay. So that means
Unsolicited direct mail is something that happens every day, and you
I get
probably
a
see
lot.
that every day. But the thing
Yeah.
is that it's there's reasons why, and there's reasons why there's arguments to be made that some of this should be implemented for display ads and digital advertising. Is that there's a postmark on that piece of mail, there's a return address, there's a the product. You're not really incepting anybody's mind. It's a very clear transaction. So that's, and you can, most of the time, you can probably deduce why you got that piece of mail.
Yeah. Or maybe it'll create arguments at home as to why you're getting mail from the
Right.
dispensary when there's no one that's supposed to be shopping at the dispensary. But in this case, like I said, it's a great way to take an audience that you may have that either are lap shoppers or they're just people that have given you their contact information. Even if you've done some sort of physical activation, like a demo day or something, and people have given you their email address, you can turn those email addresses into physical addresses. You can send direct mail. You can take those email addresses, you can turn them into audience targeting for display advertising. And that gives you another way to use an asset that you already have to drive more customers through your front doors or through your
Yeah.
online.
And even having the physical address, even if you're not going to send a mailer, makes that record more valuable as a digital asset as well. Because having an email address is great for targeting digital, but having an email address plus a residential address is even better. Having an email address plus residential address plus a cell phone number is even better. So, the more touch points you have on an individual, the more chance you have of that individual actually ever seeing your ad.
Right. And then going back to how we started the conversation, if you do have that email address, you can, get a physical address, but you can also get all the demographic information that is relative to that household,
Right.
which can then help you understand, who's engaging with you, who is becoming active customers, who's not, what do you know about them? How do you start messaging them in a way that is going to be, that they're going to be receptive to?
Yep.
Cool. Well, I think that wraps up everything that I wanted to cover today. Do you have any other parting words or aquatic
No,
analogy?
I think just like knowing your customer, because what you find is actually this kind of gets into deduping. So having two email addresses that belong to the same person, you can actually combine those records. Knowing your data, taking care of your data, is super important. And as we've learned over the past several months on this podcast, the sky's the limit once you get your ducks in a row.
When do you think they're gonna not use the word podcast anymore? I don't. Do they even sell iPods anymore? I feel like that name
I
stuck
don't know.
well for it's. I guess we'll find out. All right. Well, thank you for your time, Matt.
All right.
I'm Jake. I'm the CEO of MediaJel. If you want to send me direct questions, you can find me Jake at MediaJel or on LinkedIn. Matt, what's your
Matt
personal
at
phone number?
statara.com. STATARA.com.
Yeah, great. Thanks for joining, everyone. Have a great week. We will see you back in a couple weeks.
All right.
Cheers.